Hey guys, so today I'm going to share with you some tips about the GRE and how you can avoid how to have a terrible experience like I did. I will explain my experience and how you can very easily avoid it if you keep watching. Okay, so basically as a background, the GRE is the Graduate Record What is it again? The Graduate Record Examination. It's an exam that's used to get into a lot of different graduate schools, which your girl thought that she wanted to do before because I didn't know what to do with my life, so I thought I should take it. After debating back and forth whether I wanted to take it or not, I eventually decided to just take it because if I did want to go to grad school, the GRE scores that you get lasts, I think, 3 years. Some people say 5. I need to double check on that. I'll put it up on the screen. Your scores last a while, so I was like, you know what? I figure I'll just take it, and if I don't go to grad school right after college, which I obviously decided not to, I can still have my scores to go later on. I ended up like taking it and doing okay, so if you want to hear that story, I'm going to save it to the end, but I'm just going to explain to you guys like what I did to study, tips, etc. Okay, so I realized that in the beginning of this video, I didn't really explain what the GRE consists of as far as when you go in and take the exam. So I'm going to go through that with you guys really quickly. This is future Jill trying to explain it to you because I realized that you might want to know that. Anyway, I have the book here. It explains it. So basically, the GRE is a 4-hour exam to test your verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, analytical writing, and I guess that's it. You have a scoring scale of 130 to 170 in 1-point increments, and the writing section is in half-point increments, which means that 1 point can really do a lot. So if you take it a second time and you only go up 2 points, it's actually a lot. It's not like the SAT where, you know, you go up a few points. It's not as big of a deal. And so basically you get 1 break after your 3rd section. Yeah, so I'm not going to go into detail too much more about the GRE. You can kind of read up on that. I'm just going to give you guys some tips on how I handled studying for the GRE and my personal experience. Okay, going back to the rest of the video. Okay, so basically first I suggest getting a book. I used the Kaplan GRE Prep Plus. It's called the Prep Plus because if you get it brand new, it actually comes with a online resource, which I highly suggest you get. Obviously you can get this book for a lot cheaper if it's used, but I don't think you can get the online resource if it's already used or if the code is used. If you don't want the online resource, I really don't think getting a book that's like a year or 2 older is really going to make that much of a difference unless there's a really big change that is going to happen for the GRE. But honestly, I think the questions, you need to learn like what types of questions rather than study certain things. Like I feel like the verbal section, the words have basically stayed the same for a few years. So if you guys get something that's a year or 2 older, I really don't think it'll make that much of a difference. So after you get a book, I suggest you get a Gre app. And so basically that will have all of your vocab that you need. One of the biggest things that I was worried about was the verbal section. I think that the app really helped. It's basically just Quizlet, but for GRE words. Go through the GRE book, just glance through kind of the simple geometry, simple statistics, formulas that you're going to need that maybe you learned at one point and you just need to brush up on very quickly. And then I would just study a little bit and then take a practice exam. Go online if you have the GRE Prep Plus, which I suggest because it's set up similar to how you would be taking it at a testing center. Personally, I did terrible in the verbal section, but I read that a lot of people do that because I took it when I didn't study any of the words at all. And so obviously most of the verbal, in my opinion, is memorization. If you just memorize roots and the words that are on one of those common GRE words lists, you're gonna do pretty well. So after doing that, you can kind of just see where you need to focus on more because the Kaplan kind of shows you where you went wrong. I think it even shows you specific questions. And so depending on what grad school you're looking at can also determine on what you need to focus on. So personally, I would be going to some sort of STEM focused grad school, which means that most of the time they're looking at the math section. And so obviously I wanted to spend a little bit more time on that. For the verbal section, I went through flashcards for at least 2 or 3 months before taking the GRE, because most of that is memorization. As far as the math sections, I actually studied that a little bit later because I'm stronger in math. There's not as much to study, but a lot of it for me was focusing on doing certain problems in the time that they give you. And so another thing that I like about the online GRE prep book is that you can actually go through as many sections as you want for math or any of the verbal sections, and you can actually target specifically the kind of questions that you struggle with. So for example, in the verbal section, they have a question with 3 blanks and you have to pick the correct word for each of those blanks, which would make sense in the context of the sentence. And so for me, and I think for a lot of people, the 3 blank questions are the hardest, because if you don't get all 3 right, you don't get the credit. I would actually make practice sets that do medium and hard questions of those specific questions, just so that I can get a little bit better of knowing the vocab and how to find the context of a sentence or for a word for those particular problems. Okay, so before I go on to my story and my experience, I just want to say that I did take the GRE 2 times because the first time was completely disastrous. And so these are just kind of like the tips that I learned, so hopefully they helped you. One of the biggest tips for me is to make sure to do problem sets with the same time that you would have on the exam, because I think that when I took it the second time, I felt a little bit more relaxed doing certain problems. The first time I was definitely more nervous, as I will explain, and that caused me to make errors and everything. So if you're like me and sometimes you get testing anxiety, definitely work on doing it with a certain amount of time, either timing yourself or doing it online where it already has a timer for you. So you can work on timing yourself, doing certain questions, and how you want to prioritize other questions before attempting other ones that might take you a little bit longer. So basically everything that I told you, I basically did for the first GRE. So I did do individually timed verbal and math sections, and I did a few writing sections, but I really wasn't that concerned about that. But I definitely think that doing entire practice exams, which I didn't do the first time. Okay, so the first time I took the GRE, and in the math section, which I just want to say, side note, I think that the math section of the GRE is unneeded at times to go to grad school, because personally, as a chemistry major, I took up to Calc 2, which isn't that high, but it's not algebra and geometry and statistics, and I didn't have to take statistics. And so all of that was just recalling a lot from high school for me. I was never bad at it, I was good at it in high school. It was just recalling from a long time ago, and I was like, why do I need this to do a PhD in chemistry? You know what I'm saying? I just feel like some of the GRE is just not needed for certain grad schools, but that's why they're kind of doing away with it. So anyway, just side note, just putting that out there. I think I had the first section as a math section after the writing portions. So you have 2 essays to write, and then you have a math, or then you have your first section. My tactic was that I wanted to do all the questions that I felt comfortable with, and then I was skipping word problems because I always took a little bit longer on word problems, and they were all type in an answer, and having multiple choice, at least you have 5 possible answers to pick from. But when it's just like a blank type in the answer response, you kind of have less of a chance to do it correct or get the correct answer. And so since those already make me nervous and having word problems take a little bit longer, I was skipping those, and there was a chunk of them all together. Well, as you know, it went disastrous, and this is because I was skipping them, and at the end, at the same part of where it says to go to the next question, the last question, it turns into exit section. And so I was looking at the problem, hitting exit section, because I thought it meant, or I don't even know how to explain this. I skipped all these questions and accidentally hit exit section when I was looking at the screen and meant to hit next question, but I didn't realize it was the last question, which means that I basically threw away half of a math section without attempting like half of it. Basically I started tearing up and I asked the administrative person if I can redo it, and I couldn't, obviously, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I could have just like walked out right there, but then I was like, I've already paid for this, I've already done the essays, and so basically I finished the rest of the exam, and I knew it went terribly because the second math section is based off how you do in the first math section. It was basically like middle school math because it thought that I didn't know how to do any of the questions in the first section, so that was wonderful. And at the end of the GRE, you can pick whether to keep your scores and submit it, or you can say, just don't tell me the scores, don't submit it, don't let it go on record at all, which I could have done because I thought, I know I probably did terrible in the first section, or I could keep my score, see how well I did in all the other sections so that I can see how I can improve those, and then I can do better the second time. I chose to keep my scores, which ended up being pretty bad. I mean, just in the math section, and I cried. Let's just say, it's kind of expensive to just do a stupid mistake like that, and I was very upset. So anyway, I ended up taking it a couple weeks after, chilled out a little bit, just buckled down and focused on timing and not getting crazy nervous on math and skipping questions and accidentally hitting the exit section button, which you shouldn't have to practice, but it's whatever. I can't believe I'm putting this out on YouTube. So I went up like a few points, which I feel like that doesn't sound like a lot, but on the GRE it is a lot. I went up a few points in the other sections and drastically in the math section the second time, so all is well. I ended up doing well, but I learned that testing anxiety can cost you money, my friends. I really don't like standardized testing personally. I think that that's not a good way to portray how smart a person is, and I think that's why they're doing away with the GRE for a lot of schools and a lot of graduate programs, which I think, personally, I think that's amazing. But I took it anyway because you never know, and I might still use it, honestly. Alright guys, so that's my story, that's what happened, that's how I studied. If you guys want any more videos like this, please comment down below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!